Let's chat about breaking barriers and making bold career moves. Today, I'm joined by Elisabeth Bykoff. This woman is a seasoned leader. She has a rich background in consulting, startups, operations, and she recently took the plunge into the next chapter of her career. In this episode, we're discussing navigating male-dominated industries, recognizing and overcoming bias, finding the courage to make her mark in the world, stepping up and letting go of that internal dialogue, and so much more. We really dove into what Elisabeth realizes that she wished she'd known 20 years ago. She's talking about the challenges, the finding the allies, the carving out your own path. This is a conversation you don't want to miss. So let's dive in. Welcome to the show, Elisabeth. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Let's dive straight in. Tell us about your career journey and why it's been anything but linear. This is the thing that I really took away when we first started chatting. What lessons have you learned about building your career and not following this traditional path?
Yeah, French born and raised. Don't hold that against me. But I've been in the US for over 20 years. And as you know, I started my career in consulting for 10 years at a really big firm. And I had a chance to start the Salesforce practice for them here in the US compared to the competition that was way ahead of us. And so, spent 10 years, exited myself, and then went into the startup ecosystem. And that's where I've been for the last 8 years, from helping very late stage companies all the way to very, very early stage company last year, and coaching and being an operator and also angel investing myself. And now decided to take the plunge and be a founder. And so, I think we talked about that a bit earlier, but when I first started as a kid out of two masters, I can't just say college, but two colleges, it's not that. But you think, hey, especially coming from France, that you're going to get one job, you're going to sign up, and that's going to be it. And to be honest, I thought I was going to be a baby of consulting forever. And then after 10 years, I really realized that I wanted to do something else. The building part of the experience I got at that consulting firm, was way more exciting to me than just the typical selling and delivering. And so I took an exit without knowing what was next. I didn't have a job. I literally just quit. And so, I think that's something that, has stuck with me from the earlier years of thinking straight line, right? And now being twists and turns. That's really what's been going on for the last 8 years, twists and turns. And I don't know what my next twist is going to be, or my next turn. But I think that's really something that's been very interesting, and I have met a lot of people now that have gone through the same journey, to be honest, right? And I think that's great.
It's so interesting you say that, because I have so many conversations with women who will tell me, I can't do this because, and the because is essentially because they don't think they followed the perfect path. And yet, I actually think most people don't have a linear path. I think it's a misconception. What gave you the confidence to go and be different? Like, you obviously did that, like straight out the gate. You took the plunge. You quit working for corporate quite early on and just went for it. Like, why did you do that? Like, why did you believe it was possible? Or maybe what mindset did you have?
I really wanted to be a partner when I joined PwC. And 10 years into it, I was on the path to making partner, about to sign my life away. And I think they were dangling the carrot in front of me, and it was getting pushed away slowly, but constantly pushed out. That's the better way to say it, right? And I was getting really tired. I was on the plane every week for 5 years straight. I was exhausted. I didn't know at the time, obviously. And I thought, you know what? It was a bit, spiteful of me. I think I could have stayed maybe a little longer. But I had reached a point where I felt that I was doing the same thing again and again, that had given above and beyond for the company. And I was seeing other men getting, promoted, getting to the partnership, when they were treating people outrageously horribly. And so, from that perspective, I just felt like, hey, you know what? I think it's not the right time. It might never be the right time. It's not the right place. And I just took the plunge. Um, it was scary. I'm not gonna lie, right? You look at your finances, you say, can I pull this off? I didn't have a job, right? So it's not like something was waiting for me. And at that time, 2017, you're like, is it gonna take a month, 3 months, 6 months to find a job? I didn't know. My husband, I have to admit, was very supportive. So that was great. I think I thought if I didn't do it now, I would never do it, because I think I would have stayed into the cogwheel of like trying to make to the partnership. And I was like, you know what, there is something out there. This is not the all and be all. And I wanted to try grab that opportunity. So I took the risk. I'm not gonna lie, I grieved not becoming a partner, right? And quitting a firm that I had great opportunities and great experience, great people I was working with. It was also a grieving process. It took some time for me to grieve that experience, but I wouldn't trade it for the world, right? I'm really glad I did it. So.
So many things there, like, quitting without a plan. And I think in the current 2025 climate, I think people are very scared of doing that. And yet some of the most extraordinary women I have had the pleasure to know, work with, coach, just have chats with, have done exactly that, even in the current climate, because they know that even when things are difficult, sometimes the right thing to do is to pause, take a step back and go, what do I need? What do I want? And taking that plunge from a place of power rather than staying in a job that, from the sounds of it for you, you said you were exhausted. You said you could have stayed a little bit longer and maybe you were being a bit selfish, but I wouldn't call that bad. I wouldn't call that selfish. I'd actually say you were looking after yourself, because if you're exhausted, that's wrong. So what would you tell your younger self now, who is trying to make that decision and maybe terrified? What would you tell her?
Everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Everything is going to just be fine. I think it's your hindsight is always 2020, right? I think, I might have done it completely differently and not have waited 10 years. I might have stayed only 2.5 years and exited more quickly to go to another non-consulting type companies and then jump into the startup ecosystem. I just didn't, I didn't know I needed to stay long enough to get a green card. There was also immigration reasons, right? For why to stay that long. And because of that, I think maybe not 2.5 years, but 5 years, I would have just stuck to it, just to be able at least to have that freedom to be able to then jump to anything else. But then you get again in the cogwheel and you don't exit. And so, I think it's really, everything is fine. Nobody expects you to now stay at a company like our parents or grandparents used to do, right? For 25 or 30 years and get a pensions. Those don't exist anymore for most of us anyway. And I think it's also growth. I would not have grown as much if I had not gotten out and also brought some more creative activities or, hobbies, whatever you want to call it, right? Into my experience through those moments of in between, right? In between jobs, in between, experiences, in between responsibility, whatever you want to call it. And I would tell that to my younger self, like, don't forget your creative side and, go do those things, because they're as much part of your growth as, the day-to-day career job.
I think you really hit the nail on the head there, which is you would maybe have done things differently if you had, I'm going to put words in your mouth, but a little bit more confidence. And I mean, we've definitely had a shift in the last decade, which is it's now accepted as normal to not stay in a job for your whole career. I think you and I must be a similar age, and we both started our careers with a lot of older role models who had been lifers, right? And yet there was already the shift. I still knew plenty of people who moved around, but somehow they weren't the role models I was following. Do you think that was going on for you as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think coming from France, not as entrepreneurial at the time. I mean, it has changed in the last 20 years. You were joining a big company and that was it. Or you were going to go and switch to another big company. There was starting a company was not the norm. Nobody would teach us about that opportunity of creating a company at the time. And so you come with that background, right? That cultural background, whatever you want to call it. And you get into another big firm here that's safe, right? It's safe. It's you can always get laid off, but it's safer than a startup, let's say. And I think you look at the people that have been there, and a lot of the partners there have it takes 10 plus, they say on average 13 to 15 years to make partners. So then, and when you're in, right? You're rarely going to jump, because there are benefits of you to stay as long as you can. And so, yeah, a lot of the role models I had at the beginning were men, by the way, mainly, that had gone through that journey. And, that was the goal, right? The North Star at the time. And so you don't explore. I didn't explore as much what other opportunities I had. I had a couple of times, once in 2010 and once in 2016, actually, to start thinking, hey, maybe I should exit. I should just go and do something else. And every time there was good reasons. You find yourself good reasons, money, timeline, I'm going to get promoted, whatever it is, right? Like you always find a good excuse. Let's call them excuses. That's what they are to not do it. But again, I think it's, it is what it is, right? I mean, I think we had to break through this cultural background and those role models we looked up to, but
yeah.
It's all good.
Well, talking about breaking through cultural background and role models, I know one of the things that you and I spoke about before was bias and the challenges you face as a woman in leadership. What advice would you give to women navigating the barriers you experience? Like, can you give us more on those barriers? You told me, but I'd love to know a little bit more for the audience on the bias you experience, the promise of being a partner but not getting it, shifting requirements. Tell us a little bit about that. And, is that a male-dominated industry thing or not? Tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talked, I grew up with boys. Let's call it that, right? I started in STEM in France, and you have to pick that really early on in high school. So I was always the minority in a way, right? It was 20%, 30% of us, right? Barely in science. And then going through prep school and engineering school, still the ratio at the time was lower. And to be honest, I never got into the workplace thinking I was a minority in a male-dominated industry, right? Even in consulting at the time, it's gone way better, right? A lot of initiatives to bring more women and other diverse background in the workforce. But when I started, we were still 25-30%. My guess is, right, the normal percentage at the time. And as I was in non-leadership roles, I think never saw myself as there's a bias. I was one of the boys, and it was totally fine. That's what I grew up with, right? From 16 on, or, I was one of the boys. For me, the bias really starting appearing when I reached, the director level, getting ready for the next step, which is pretty much, I wouldn't say breaking the glass ceiling, but like that next step to get to the partnership. That's where I started realizing there were things that, oh, interesting, I had never experienced that before, because I was always delivering and selling and hitting my numbers. That was not a problem, right? But I would get feedback on being, I wouldn't say emotional, but, rough on the edges or too direct, or, things that compared to some of my male colleagues they would never get, some of that feedback. And so, that's when I really realized that they were, it's almost like they had higher expectations of me as a woman. Compared to some of my male colleagues that were just getting promoted. And I think it's still true outside. Yes, consulting at the time was a male-oriented, industry. I think it still is, even though the numbers are better. But even moving into the startup world, which is also, significantly male-dominated, and especially as a founder now, as we all know, capital only goes to 2% of women founders. So there's a bias there, and we all are aware of that. That's where, that's where you have to change your leadership, I think, style, your mindset, at least when you get to that. I think there is a higher responsibility on us women leaders to actually help other women leaders, as well as women coming into the workforce, to kind of really coach and help, support, I think, mentor, whatever you want to call it. And that's something that, I think we do have men allies with us. This is not it's not completely black and white. There's a lot of gray areas, right? And I think you have to find those men allies, and then really just really push through and continue like making your spot in that world of, hey, we are who we are. We are different. We don't lead the same way, and it's okay. It should be totally acceptable. And, it doesn't make one, men leadership better or worse than women leadership. It's just different mindsets. And I think people have to be okay with that. And we have to be okay with that with ourselves. I think sometimes we tend to think that if we adapt a bit more to the male leadership or man leadership, style. I'm not talking men as the gender, but that style, maybe it's going to help us. And I think in some cases it did help women, but then what do you do with it after that? Right. And so I think that's the big thing.
You just touched on so many things that I fundamentally believe in, agree with, see all the time, recognizing that we're different and that's okay. It's okay to be different. I think it's something we just need to embrace as a gender. It's okay to not be like men. In fact, I would go further and say, I say this all the time, what works for men doesn't work for women. Trying to emulate the men in the room, you will get told that you're too aggressive, you're rough around the edges, you're too emotional. You will just get that feedback. We have to navigate it differently. And what works for us is different. And it's okay. And it's good. I think the other thing that you didn't quite explicitly mention, but you touched on, is recognizing the bias. I think one of the things I see holding us back as women, I think particularly our generation, is we grew up hearing from our worldly inspiring female role models of our mother's generation who had been in the feminist 60s, who had fought their cause, had worked really hard. Them saying there's bias out there, you've got it easier than we did. And we were like, there's no bias. We're going through school and we're like, yes, I'm the only woman in the room, but there's not any bias. And then it suddenly hits us. I talk to so many women, it suddenly hits in their 30s when they're like, wait, hold on. I've been doing all these things and I'm still not getting ahead. This isn't me anymore. And I think that acceptance of there is bias still, it's not what our parents' generation experienced, but it is there, allows you to move through it. While you deny it, you don't move through it. Would you agree with that? Because what I heard is you moving through it there.
Yeah. I agree that it's different than from the previous generations. I think we are still standing on the work they've done, whether it's our mothers, our grandmothers, I think, especially grandmothers, right? I think there are things that we would not be able to do. They were not able to do, and we are able to do. And I'm talking not just career-wise, but getting a divorce. It was very front.
Yeah.
Anything like that. So even from a personal perspective and financial perspective and you name it, right? And I think that's progress, right? We needed that, and we should be more than grateful, right? I don't think neither of us would be where we are today without that work that was done by those generations. It doesn't mean I wouldn't say the fight is over. That sounds like as if we're constantly in this fight. It's very antagonistic, and I don't think that's what we're trying to talk about here or do. It's more, there is still effort to go through, right? We still know there is, like I was mentioning, capital disbursement, right? In startup, how come only 2% of women get funded, right? It's just, what does it mean? Yes, the numbers are different. There's not as many women-started companies, for sure. We understand that for different reasons, but you're going to tell me you can find exceptional women that have great ideas to fund? I hear sometimes those things and I'm like, this is just not right. I meet women constantly, startup founders, and, with great traction, you name it, they still have troubles with that. And so I think I was a bit in denial, to be very frank, Toni, right? When you're growing up and you're not hitting the bias yet, right? You're like, oh no, what are you talking about? No, not at all. I have no problem. One of the boys, but then you hit that threshold, right? That seniority maybe, or another industry, whatever it is, right? And there is a bias, and it took me time to acknowledge it, and I even had a friend say, I think they discriminated on you on this thing. I think you should have sued them. And I was like, no, French way too. That's not a big thing in France. So my French way came out. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And she's like, I think you had ground to get something. I didn't go there, right? I would not have anyway. But yeah, that's when you realize that, okay, all right, so this is coming from an external person. It's validating what I was feeling. And yeah, you have to acknowledge it. And now you know it. And I think if you know it to your point, then you're not just ignoring and trying to move through your career and just pretend oh no, this is just normal, or no, it's not. So it's, how do you turn that to your advantage? Yeah, again, we're still in the fight.
Yeah, well, it brings me to one of my next question about what you've learned as a leader that you wish you'd known earlier, because I think one of the things there is if you don't accept your bias, that there's bias against you, then you internalize like it's my fault. And one of the things I've seen so much in leaders that I work with is so much lack of internal validation. They fundamentally believe they are not good enough, that they're broken, that they are not hitting the mark. And I think partly because they haven't accepted the bias. So that's like a leadership lesson I would take from our discussion. But I would love to hear, what important leadership lessons have you learned as you've grown into senior roles and now as a founder? Like, what do you believe you wish you'd known 10 years ago?
Find your mentors or build a network of mentors and allies earlier on. I think I didn't do that as well. I was so caught up in the partnership and the work, even the work, right? Just working, traveling, which makes it a bit sometimes harder because you're not put, and you start building a network maybe in where you live or in the community you live or in a professional community that I lived or anything like that. So it took me a bit of time to do that, longer than I think I should have. So if there's one thing I would say, start early as you can, to build those mentors, coaches, allies. I think the other piece is we have a tendency, and I would say it's just women, but I think women more than men, to beat ourselves up. We will always find a way of justifying that. Maybe we could have done this. I could have done this differently, or I could have said something differently, or I could, no, it's me, and we do that personally, professionally. This is just not, I'm still guilty of it. And so I think it's great to reflect. And that's what I would have told my younger self. Reflect, write down or think through what you could have done better, and then just move on.
Yes.
Move on. Move on. It's not just you. It's, it's two people in a dialogue or in a situation, or several people in that sense. So yes, you can be the bearer of like, oh, it was all me, but it's never like that. Right. And I think in some cases I've beaten myself sometimes to the bone, right. Of saying, oh, I should have done this better. I should have, which doesn't help because yes, there's always areas for improvement, but it's never, you can improve as much as you can. The other side also has to change, right? Also has to acknowledge that, they might have handled the situation not the right way or anything like that. And so, you got to take a step back. And I don't think I did it very well always as I was younger before I got to leadership. I'm still not perfect. Don't get me wrong. That's my default. I still go to the default. What could I have done better? But I think you have to learn to move on, and you also have to accept for others to accept you. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, I am who I am. Of course, I have areas for improvement, and it's going to be, for me, I know it's a lifelong, in some cases, I'm French, communication style in the US. I know I'll always have to be careful or mindful, of my audience. And I call it my lifelong project, right? But at the end of the day, I am also who I am, right? So it's, as I accept other people, I have to allow for other people to accept me, and not everybody will. And that's okay. That's okay.
Well, one of the things you said to me that stuck with me was you described leadership as hard and full of moments where we second guess ourselves. And I want to pick your brains. Like, again, what would you tell your younger self or anyone listening who is maybe going through what you went through a decade ago or is on the way to where you are right now? How do we navigate those moments of self-doubt with power, with purpose, and move away from that second guessing that I know dominates so many of us all the time?
It's funny. I'm second guessing myself now more than I used to. The founder role, right? Like, so now I'm solo founder.
It's hard. Yeah.
Which was not the idea. I was not set. I was going to have a co-founder, but now here I am for now. And
I applaud you, by the way, for not having a co-founder. I've had so many conversations recently with CEOs who have had a co-founder or a partner and regretted it. There's something in the air at the moment. So
apparently,
yeah.
But because of that, this plus I don't have a mirror, if that makes sense, right? I have my white wall, but my white wall is not very communicative when I want to throw out ideas or point of view. And you can talk to your spouse and you can talk to friends, but it's not the same. They're not in the business in those moments. I think that plus the fact that I've coached startup and I'm still coaching startup or helping them, it's harder to apply what you tell other people to yourself too.
Yeah. There's a reason I have a coach, even though I'm a coach, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, we talked about that, right? So it's a double whammy right now. It's no co-founder, so no specific person to bounce things with, and then this second guessing, like what would I tell my coachees or the startups I've helped in the past? And to be honest, it's just giving yourself grace. It's easier said than done. I know that. I have a tendency to want to run away. Believe it or not, it's almost the when something really is eating at me and I'm second guessing myself. What I found is just trying to reset and maybe take a break, and then after that I'm all in action. I've discovered that I have a tendency to just stop thinking, just act, and then it works. It doesn't work, course correct, but really quickly just reset and just get into movement, if that makes sense. If you're in that action, I think you have less tendency to second guess, because now you're really moving and you're like, hey, it might not work, but we're going to try, right? And then we'll course correct that way. So I would say, keep moving, keep doing. Stop thinking. Sometimes we just have to stop thinking for a bit.
Yeah, stop thinking for a little bit. I think we get so in our own heads, and actually just sometimes we need to step away from the thoughts. So I love that. All right. We have covered so much ground here. There is one final question I want to ask you before we move on to the quickfire round, which is, what made you go from working in coaching others, working for others, to full-on founder? Like, obviously you've taken an interest in kind of like dabbling in entrepreneurship, but like, why now? Why at this point is it time to be a founder? Like, what was your mindset behind that?
Yeah. One, I come from intrapreneurship, so building that practice at PwC. I really enjoy that part more than anything else. So that was the first reason also one of the reasons why I exited in 2017, to get into that. Let's go help builders. And again, at the time, I didn't think I could be a founder, very transparently, even though I had kind of done it within the state, a very big firm. I thought I was an operator, not a founder, that I could help a lot of founders, but that I didn't have an idea. I didn't have something that would, drive me, or, I was just like, I'm an operator. Let's go help other people be successful. And that's okay with me. So from that perspective, that's what I did, right? For 7+ years, or 6-7 years. I also invested. So I said, hey, I can also participate, small amount, but let's help other founders. And then coaching, right? Based on all my consulting and all my experience. And then, to be very honest, what happened was, as I was helping more founders answering the same questions over and over again, and OpenAI coming out at the end of 22, I really thought there has to be a better way to help founders. And that was really the mission. I mean, the mission that came out of me was like, how do I multiply myself, or all the peeps I know that have been working with founders? How do we bring all this knowledge and really help more founders that don't get to raise capital, or, get into an accelerator, or don't have the same support system? How do we help more founders or small entrepreneurs, solo entrepreneurs and small businesses? So it's really where it came down to. And I really enjoyed that. And I was like, this is my mission. How do I do this? Right. And after thinking, I've been an operator, I've worked for other founders, and, like all of us, bosses that were like, oh, this was not, I don't want to work for you anymore. I'm going to do something else. It was a challenge for me to be like, hey, can you do this? Like, this is the last hat you haven't worn. Can you do this? And I wanted to prove myself whether I could do it or not, no matter what the outcome would be, and have that experience of sitting in that chair and say, any decision I make, it's on me. I can't blame anybody else, right? It's on me. And so that's really how I got into it, is just challenging myself and say, it's a big risk, but if I don't do it, I'll regret it. So no matter what, I want to have that experience. And that's how I pulled the trigger. So talk to me in 5 years. I'll see if, which outcome and what I've learned.
Oh, well, I'm excited to see where you are in 5 years. I think it's going to be an interesting and hopefully I know it's going to be a powerful story. I hope it's also really financially powerful for you. But I know whatever happens in the next 5 years, you are going to be in an awesome place, just because of the way you talk about yourself and the way you have learned to move through some of the discomfort. whatever happens, you are going to go so far. It's going to be exciting. So I can't wait to catch up with you in 5 years' time. We'll see. Let's move on to the quickfire round. You ready for this?
Yeah.
What is the worst piece of advice you've ever been given?
Change who you are.
Oh, somebody actually said that. Oh my God.
Well, I mean, not exactly through those words, but it was pretty much, you got to fit the mold to then get what you want, get to where you want to go. And that's actually and I never did do it, thank God. But
good for you.
That's the worst piece of advice. Here you go.
Yeah, ladies listening, do not fit the mold. Be yourself. Be authentic. There's a good way to be authentic, by the way. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given, Elisabeth?
Care about people. I had a really great coach during my time at PwC that taught me the power of coaching people and spending time with people and helping them grow.
Yeah, take care of your people, and the everything else takes care of itself, in my opinion. Yeah, take care of your people. What is the last book you read, and would you recommend it?
I'm actually reading Mythos from Stephen Fry. I don't know if you know that. He wrote an entire very funny. I mean, it's a book about all the myths related to the Greek mythology. And I was always interested to read that and read his readings, because he got into, from movies to reading. So that's what I'm almost done. I'm 65% into the book, and it's fun. It's just remind me of what we got taught at school. So, and, all the expressions sometimes we use come from all those myths, which we kind of know, but we don't know all of them. And so I thought, what, let's forget about business for a second, or self-help or whatever. Let's go back to history and do something like that. So I always do a couple of books like that throughout the year that I take a break from reading.
Well, I have to admit, selfishly, there's a reason I asked this question. It's because I get so many great book recommendations, and some people are very much like self-help, leadership, running a business. And every now and then I get like a real nugget of like a fiction book, or in this case, nonfiction, that I would never have picked up. But I love a bit of Stephen Fry, so I might just have to go and check that one out. I get like, my reading list is immense and it's amazing. I love it. This has been fabulous. So how can people find out more about you, what you do, what you're doing in your new company called Boxy? What can we do to support you?
Yeah, absolutely. Always available on LinkedIn. So that's the best way to find me. And if you want to reach out and you want to talk about what you're going through or your business, always happy to get on a call and talk about that and support not just other women, but in general. Obviously, I am a big proponent of women, so more than happy to do that. I will share my, email address, if that makes sense. And then, Boxy's now live and we're just looking for feedback. So if you're interested or you're intrigued, please feel free to reach out or even sign up. It's very, very exciting. And I'm also, I think I shared with you, right, a book's coming out. And so,
just tell us a little bit about both Boxy and the book, because we kind of skipped over that. I was so into you that we skipped over Boxy and your book. Tell us a little bit about both before we wrap up today.
Yeah, absolutely. So Boxy we're building the first agentic COO for startup founders and small businesses. So I keep calling all the crap we don't want to do as founders, right? That we still need to do to build a business. We're trying to see how far we can take it to guide and automate that for entrepreneurs and solo entrepreneurs and small businesses in general.
So much.
So we're really doing that, but we're approaching the market a bit differently. We're not just going to founders. We're also trying to go to investors and say, hey, we're trying to create this hub and this virtuous circle between founders and funders, so we can make more startups and more entrepreneurs successful. That's really what we're trying to do. So big change of mindset, but I'm hopeful. It's slowly but surely getting traction and getting some good feedback. So very excited about that. And then the book is called French Landing. It's been 4 years in the making. It's 20 funny stories of me coming into the US as a French woman. So you can imagine like the cultural shock and differences. So there is chapters from dating to religion to politics, you name it, wine even, and just very self-deprecating, great beach read. That was the point of it. And so, yeah, excited about that. It's gonna be a fun ride there too. Completely different side of me and a different side, a different business model, if I can say that, different experience. So that's the book.
I'm interested in the book when it lands. That's going to be interesting. So, one final question for you. What final thoughts do you want to leave us with today?
I'm going to cheat. It's going to be two things because you say thoughts with an S. So here you go. I'm using the plural. One, don't change who you are. I've heard it so many times of trying to fit a mold, and I've beaten myself up about it. Like, why do I change or what do I improve? Same thing, right? And yes, we all have areas of improvement, but I think stay authentic. That's another one, but I think it ties absolutely about who you are. I think even in this time of age, I think you hear more about that authenticity. People want to see that. LinkedIn is a horrible place for that, by the way. We were just talking about that with somebody where we're like, who's going to talk about the horrible stories about being a founders and the valleys? And I would say too, if you are thinking about making a change, do it. I think it's a reflection that something's not working for you at that point. If that could be, you're not being fulfilled at work, or you're not liking people you work with, whatever the reasons are. And so don't be afraid. Find help and support. It's scary. Totally get it. Find help and support, but I would highly encourage people to do it, because I think you never know what's on the other side of it, and most of the time you find your way, you find your people, and it's a great adventure despite the twists and turns. So,
what a beautiful note to leave us on! Like, it's a great adventure despite the twists and turns, and I think that kind of epitomizes the start of our conversation today, which is there's no right linear path. The twists and turns, I think, are part of what makes us wonderfully unique as women in tech. I think we almost necessarily have unusual stories as women in tech, but it's that difference that I think means we have so much impact. And women like you can go off and create companies that are doing something that most people are not thinking of, and trying to tackle a problem that traditional thinking, linear thinking, the linear path thinking wouldn't necessarily try and bite off, going and talking to investors. So I'm hoping that listeners listening today embrace that non-traditional path, embrace the twists, the turns, embrace who they are. Don't fit the mold. Go off and be unique, and maybe read a little bit of nonfiction that's not related to business and leadership along the way. Thank you for listening. Go off and change the world, everyone.